Hello everyone, and welcome to Counselor Feature Friday. I'm your host, Brian Urban. In these features, we hope to give you some simple tips, tidbits, and tricks to make your days easier and your patients happier. In this feature, we're going to talk about invoice locking. This is a really unique tool where you can decide how editable invoices are. What I mean by that is you can set a standard date or a rolling date, looking backwards, saying how many days in the past will I allow invoices to be edited. So let's kind of get in the details of that, and I think it'll make more sense as we go through. So I'm going to start by clicking on Administration in the top menu bar, and then selecting Invoice Options. Within the Invoice Options screen, we're going to look specifically at the Invoice Locking tool. This is the tool where, once again, you can limit modifications to an invoice. What this means is that when you set a specific date, right? So you could say, I want to have a manual date. So everything prior to, let's just say, the end of the month, of the previous month, okay? You want to lock that. Or you want to say, no, maybe I don't want to lock, right? Or you want to say, I want a rolling lock, meaning looking backwards 2 days or 1 day, whatever the case may be, it's going to lock those invoices. Once those invoices are locked, it means that new things can be added to an invoice. For example, you can take new payments, you could add new line items, you could add adjustments. So for example, like an insurance claim that went out maybe a month ago and now you received the remittance, that can be applied to the invoice, no problem. But if we tried to go back and modify a line item or a payment that occurred within the lock period, we would be stopped. Right? So what this lets you do as a clinic owner manager is say, all right, do I want to have this lock? Do I want to have a manual date where I set this and say this is the date we have? Or do I want a rolling lock that just says, you know what, automatically apply a 7-day lock. Looking backwards, just keep applying this going forward. So point being is you can set this up within the invoice locking area, and then of course you click save to lock in that change. Now you do have the ability to apply this setting to specific staff members. What I mean by that is if you jump into the user list, you can go through your list of staff members and you can decide if there is any individuals you want to be able to opt out from this locking. And this typically would be like a clinic manager or owner where you're saying, I may need to go in and make a change, right? But I want that to only be done in very set scenarios. And so you can go into a specific staff member's profile, click the edit option and then security, and there is an opt-out feature here. It's called Invoice Lock Override. So when that is enabled, it basically says, okay, for this staff member's profile, when they go into an invoice that is in that locked range, that date range time period, they still will be able to make modifications. Okay, but of course, if this is not enabled, then that staff member is subject to the lock rules. And let's actually look at that. We're going to jump over to a different profile here for a staff member that it is under the locking rules. And in this clinic, we have it set to a 1-day rolling lock. So we can see here is there is an invoice here that obviously is quite old. And if we look at the line items themselves, we'll see that this staff member can only edit, right? And I want to clarify that by edit, we can just see what's within the details, right? So we can see the information that's included here. We can look at any notes, but you'll notice there's no save or update button here. There's only cancel. So even if someone put in a bunch of changes here, it wouldn't matter. There's no way to save that. So this is just for viewing the information only, not for actually making any changes. So we can see once again that this is not available. If we try to create a new line item with a date that was within the lock range, we would be stopped. Same thing goes for payments. If we try to backdate a payment, let's say we want to go ahead and take a payment here, let's say by check, and I'm just going to, we'll take the full amount here, I'm just going to bump this back a couple days here, right? That gets us into the lock range. And as soon as I think we had this set at 1 day, so let's go ahead and set it to 1 day back. As soon as I click add, what we're going to get is an error warning. It's saying this is an invalid payment date. It cannot be within the lock period. So this prevents staff from adding payments or line items to an invoice that's in that lock range. Same thing goes with the invoice info here. If you tried to update this information here, it also would be blocked if the invoice date fell within the lock range. And so when you put this all together, it gives you a great deal of control over what staff members can do within an invoice to help give you some level of assuredness. Even if it's just yourself, right? If you're a solo operation, just having some level of assuredness that, hey, when we have the books locked, particularly if you are having this information communicating to an accounting system, QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online, or Xero, any one of those accounting systems, you need that data to be consistent between counselor and the accounting system. So this gives you a lot of control over who has the ability to make changes and what the lock range is. So of course, if you have any questions about how to implement or utilize the invoice locking system, please feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, email us, live chat with us. We are always happy to help. Thank you very much for joining us for today's Counselor Feature Friday. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.